issue that
Now
I
tomorrow.
with UNECA and also EAC chambers and GLR PSF.
And as a consequence,
today we do have panelists. We are going to give each one of you 10 minutes. We are going to have a session where I'll just give the overview of
historically, if you look at
the overview of the African continental free trade area.
And the rest of the global market,
I'm also going to allow the panelists to answer a few questions, followed by questions from the participants. There'll also be questions that are streaming in, and based on the questions, and we are going to direct it to either of you, the panelists. So once again, let me just introduce our panelists. One, we do have Ms. Olive Kigongo. She is the president of Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Also as a panelist, we do have Mr. Koi Paul, who is also the president of Tanzania Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture. We do have Mr. Stephen Karingi as a PhD. He is the Regional Integration and Trade Division of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, that is UNECA. We do have Dr. Mama Keita. She is a PhD and from ECA, that's ECA Sub-Regional Office for East Africa. We do have Mr. Stephen Ruzibiza, he's a Private Sector Federation in Rwanda, CEO. We do have Mr. Dinda George, Trade Policy Advisor, Ministry of Trade in Kenya. We also do have the CEO of the East Africa Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Charles Kahodho, as a guest speaker. And we also do have another guest speaker who is Mr. Kebor Gena, CEO, Pan-Africa Chamber of Commerce. So thank you very much. And also appreciate you, the panelists who are here, who have joined us today, the 130, and also more are still joining. Thank you very much, and I believe we shall have a very interactive session. I just want to give an overview of African Continental Free Trade Area on trade and regional integration. Now, one, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is a monumental milestone on Africa's developmental roadmap that must be exploited to the full for intra-Africa trade. It will unleash unlimited opportunities, new economies of scale, income and employment generation through greater market and economic integration. Now, this program was launched 2 years ago at an African Union AU summit in Kigali. It was scheduled to be implemented from 1st July 2020, but this has been pushed out until 2021 because of the impact of COVID-19 and the need for leaders to focus on saving lives. Today, the COVID-19 pandemic is undoubtedly having an immediate and significant impact on businesses in Africa. It constitutes an unprecedented challenge. The effects of lockdowns and movement restrictions have also been devastating for communities, employees, and employers, and could potentially take years to recover from. The COVID-19 pandemic, notwithstanding its devastating impact on the health and economies of Africa, could be an opportunity to advance the free trade area in more developmental, inclusive, and mutually beneficial way for African countries. Now, the situation also calls for collective and joint post-COVID-19 recovery mechanisms by deepening economic cooperation amongst countries under the Trade Cooperation Framework, by implementing measures of recovery and strengthening economic regionalism to withstand similar shocks in the future. To discuss the impact of COVID-19 in Africa and the future of Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in partnership with UNECA, EAC Chambers, and the Great Lakes Region Private Sector Forum, have organized this webinar session to discuss and identify opportunities for COVID-19 economic recovery mechanism and way forward for AfCFTA guests, speakers, and panelists will provide updates on the business landscape across the region and discuss how the partners and firms can navigate through the crisis and continue to capitalize on opportunities created by the African Continental Free Trade Area. I'm going to go to questions and answers, but I want to give this opportunity to UNECA so that you can just give an overview of what opportunities the African Continental Free Trade Area present on the member states.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was hoping that I could share a presentation, but no problem. Now, I think we have spent a lot of time over the last 2 years.
But Stephen,
yes.
Sorry to cut you short. Within your time, you can still give your presentation. No problem.
No worries. Yeah. So I was going to say that over the last two years, we have spent a lot of time as a continent discussing what we see as the opportunities that the AfCFTA presents. We've done a lot of empirical work, which show what as a continent the AfCFTA means for us. For instance, one of the things that we have been able to demonstrate empirically is that the AfCFTA has the potential to deepen not only the regional integration of the continent, but also to allow us to do more value addition in our production processes. In fact, according to our estimations, we demonstrate that by 2022, you would actually have the intra-African trade increasing significantly. But the most interesting part of the increase in terms of the intra-African trade is that 2/3 of the increase in intra-African trade would be on value-added goods. So that in itself presents an opportunity not only to create an economic resilience because of the diversification of processes, but we also do know that manufacturing tends to have much more valuable jobs compared to jobs that are not based on industry. That's one point. The other thing that we have demonstrated on the basis of this analytical work is the role that services are going to play in terms of the economic development. Now, we are having this webinar in a context of COVID-19, and we know one of the things that have actually been impacted significantly by COVID-19 is actually the delivery of services. We have seen the logistics, or rather the trade facilitation, which is an important part of responding, or at least keeping the economies going, being one of those things that is quickly shut down by the COVID-19 and the associated measures that governments are undertaking. So the AfCFTA is also supposed to help the African continent become much more integrated from the context of services trade. And I think one of the points that I was going to raise in my intervention now is to say that there is, under the AfCFTA services protocol, 5 services sector that have actually been identified as a priority. It so happens that those 5 services, and especially the one that relates to tourism and travel, the one that relates to issues of transport, these are some of the services that have actually been impacted significantly by COVID-19. In fact, it's one of the channels through which we have seen our economies being impacted so much negatively, because without travel, then you don't have tourists, then your hospitality industry is shut down. But we have also seen that the way countries are able to survive is if they are able to provide health services and education services. So there is this challenge question that we have to pose to ourselves as we talk about recovery and building resilience, whether the lesson that we have learned that you can actually use digital services to deliver health services and also to deliver education, whether these are two services that the AfCFTA should consider in the recovery processes. So then, of course, there is the question of the electronic commerce. Most of the businesses, and we can talk about the private, because the private sector is here, most of them are experiencing difficulties because they are not able to move their goods across borders or even within countries. But those companies that are able to deliver through the digital services, they are actually able to at least maintain some of their capacity utilization under use. So the next question then we have as we think about the AfCFTA is whether, since we had indicated that e-commerce was not going to be part of the phase 2 negotiations of the AfCFTA, is it time, as we think about implementing the AfCFTA as we have it now, that we bring forward the idea of having the e-commerce as part and parcel of what is going to be negotiated immediately the negotiations start afresh. So these are, in my introductory remarks, basically I wanted to emphasize that we know what the AfCFTA means for this continent. We know that COVID-19 has basically exposed that had we implemented the AfCFTA, we would be in a better position than we are now. And if that is the case, then we have to consider the AfCFTA as one of the instruments through which, or as one of the tools through which we have to rebuild our economies and rebuild them better. And one of the things that we have to be conscious about as we do this rebuilding, as we implement the AfCFTA, is whether is it ambitious enough, and should our member states take another look at some of the things that they had already agreed, not to reopen the negotiations, but basically to ask, would they want to expand the scope of the services negotiations, the scope of the services sectors that are going to be opened up under the services protocol? That is one. And two, as they negotiate issues of competition policy, investment policies, and intellectual property rights, is it time now for us also to bring e-commerce as part of those negotiations? Because we have seen ICT and digital trade and digital economy are so crucial in terms of helping our economies not only operate now, but also to recover. Let me stop there, Mr. President.
Very, very, very good point there, Dr. Kiringi, and giving the highlights and also the opportunities within the African Continental Free Trade Area. I want to come back to you, Dr. Stephen Kiringi, on a few questions. But before I do that, let me just also add to what you've just taken us through, that the African economy was also set to grow at about 3.4% in 2019 and projected to increase to 3.9% in 2020. But then COVID-19 has had a very negative impact. We also know that over 53% of Africa's exports go to countries, particularly Europe, that are themselves suffering from the pandemic, as we all know. That has had a subdued effect on our export markets. The services sector is set to fall by between 20% to 30%, particularly travel and the hospitality industry. Finding ways to mitigate the effects of the pandemic is imperative, but the primary focus for now is to save lives so that we can also be able to get our businesses moving as well. I also do want to go to our guest speaker, Mr. Charles Kahodho, just to give you a few minutes to give your few remarks. Charles?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you all colleagues. As you have heard, my name is Charles Kahodho. I work for East African Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture. That is a regional chamber here in East Africa, coordinating the work of the 6 chambers actually now of the East Africa Community member states. The AfCFTA, of course, is an important framework for the continent. And I'm glad that myself and Mr. Kabu from Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, we have traveled that journey since 2013. In fact, it was approved in principle by the heads of state as a resolution of the heads of state in 2012. And in 2013, the Chambers of Commerce embraced it in a meeting we had in Addis, of course, when Pan-African Chamber, representing the national chambers in the African continent, signed an MOU with the African Union Commission, the Department of Trade and Industry, pledging to implement then it was called Continental Free Trade Area. You know, AfCFTA essentially is a trade. It's a trade issue. Of course, it has everything else, but the chambers of commerce are best placed to implement it. And I am trying to bring this up front so that we don't lose sight of that. The chambers of commerce has a critical role to play for successful implementation of that agenda, despite the fact that it is shifting slightly to other directions that we are aware of. But the Chamber of Commerce role currently, as it is constituted worldwide, is to facilitate trade and to make sure that people trade with each other. That is what we want to achieve in Africa, so that we can create jobs, so that we can also actually be able to add value to our very, very massive natural resources that we have in this continent, instead of, in fact, selling our raw materials and bringing back. So if we take that into account, then we know that chambers of commerce cannot get away from this agenda. And I beseech everybody who is here, a chamber member, to remember that you are a key stakeholder in this process, and you cannot get away from it, despite the fact that it's being shifted, again, as I said, from other ways. Now, if we talk about the impact of COVID-19 to, of course, the continent, and of course, the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, I don't have to belabor that. Stephen has just talked about it. But more importantly, we know the amount of goods and services that we are not able to access because, in fact, of these lockdowns. We have locked out our borders, and we are not able to freely trade with each other. That is a challenge by itself, but it brings with it also an opportunity in that within this period, maybe COVID, post-COVID time, a lot of African businesses, I am sure, will now start thinking outside the box, in the sense that most of the goods that you have been getting from elsewhere, other supply sources in China, in India, in Egypt, and wherever else, we may need to start thinking how you can develop those or produce those in-house and start trading easily with your neighbors. Obviously, AfCFTA will not happen just by a miracle. It is going to be actually driven by, first of all, Kenya trading with Uganda, Kenya trading with Tanzania, starting with your neighbors, and then the neighbors trade further out. They reach out to the others. That is how we are going to reach out to each other. And I believe that what this pandemic has shown us is that we are wholly dependent on each other, and we are also interdependent in the sense that we must create that independence within ourselves so that we are able to, in fact, support our neighbor, and our neighbor supports us. I can't see a better way of actually saying the implementation of AfCFTA will be actually successful. That is in itself a good opportunity or something that has come out of actually this dark cloud of the pandemic, that we shall trade more with each other. Our governments now are listening. Kenya here, Uganda, everybody is listening to what the productive sector of the economy would like, so that they are able to start moving the economy forward into the future. I think those discussions will start happening, and post-COVID-19 is presenting to us a very, very good opportunity within which we shall engage our governments to see where they can unlock some of the bottlenecks they have been otherwise just ignoring because they thought, oh, it is business as usual. Now, it is not business as usual, it's business unusual, in which case they must partner with the productive sector of the economy to be able to get their economies, the continent's economies, the national economies moving again.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles. I'll come back to you. Yeah. I will come back to you. Thank you very much for we have noted and for the highlights. Thank you very much. I want to go to the next guest speaker, but as Charles alluded to, there is enough opportunities in the African continent, particularly the Great Lakes region, and it's important just to say, because they are our partners in today's session, the Great Lakes Region Private Sector Forum, where I serve as the chairman. Now, the ICGLR brings together 12 countries in the Great Lakes region with the aim of creating the conditions for security, stability, and development between the member states to harness the extensive natural resource endowments and existing economic opportunities to catalyze shared prosperity and destiny. So, Charles, thank you very much. I will come back to you. I want to give this chance to Mr. Gena. Please take the platform, Mr. Gena. Mr. Gena, are you with us? Okay, as we prepare to, Mr. Gena, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay, please go ahead and just give you a few remarks.
Okay.
Please observe time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, actually, for this opportunity. I would like to say that this is a very opportune sort of meeting, and we've learned quite a lot, actually, from the various intervenants. My focus will be on two areas. One was a recent, actually, survey that we have undertaken on impact of COVID-19 on business in Africa. We've sent actually this report to all the chambers of commerce, and it gives us actually some of the critical issues that the private sector would like to be sort of addressed. And I would like actually to again invite you to look at our website to find actually this survey. The second, the survey in fact points out some of the key problems that small and medium enterprises face. For example, issues of salaries, issues of rent, issues of lack of information coming from, for example, on programs and policies that were issued by governments, and no one seemed to sort of understand and also have access to the many programs that the government has put out. And so this is something that maybe chambers have to look into. The other issue that I would like to bring about is, again, within the survey, we would like actually to do this survey for the next year. So it's a tracking survey to see whether there has been progress or whether there has been some new elements that have come into fighting the impact of COVID-19, but at the same time into the impact that the policies that the governments and the policies that the private sector follow are having on growth of business. The second point that I would like to raise is the issue of close working relations. I think this is not a national problem, actually, and not a national issue, the COVID. It's a global issue, and it is very important, actually, that we work together in bringing up policies to higher instances, and also share our experiences on these issues. So my my in fact, recommendation is that we continue actually these kinds of meetings. We are organizing ourselves a couple of meetings using Zoom, and we would like all the chambers actually to organize, and we can also provide some assistance actually in this area, because we have been able to get some funding actually for organizations that would like to use Zoom, small funds actually that we can make available to national chambers to continue this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gena. Thank you for that. For us to be able now to open the questions to the panelists, with us we have the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Trade, represented by the Trade Policy Advisor, Mr. George Dinda. I will just invite you to take the podium now and give us your few remarks. George. Mr. George Dinda will be representing the Principal Secretary, Honorable and Dr. Weru, Jackson Weru. I would also want to urge all the participants, the panelists who will not be speaking, please be on mute so that we don't have interference while we are presenting. George? George, are you with us? George? Okay, I believe he's going to join us. He could be having a technical problem, but let me just go straight to the questions. And I want to go back to Dr. Stephen Karingi of UNECA. The question to you that I pose is, what are the mechanisms in place to support regional markets and supply chain stabilization in post-COVID-19? Doctor?
Thank you, Chair. So I will answer this question, and after I answer the question, I'm afraid I'm going to leave because I have to go to another meeting. But I was going to say the following. I think we have seen conversations that are taking place about the question of global value chains. We have also seen as a continent that we import 94% of our pharmaceuticals and medical supplies from the rest of the world. And also, we know that our airlines, one way or the other, are linked also to the value chains, be it in the production of the equipment, the Boeing planes or the Airbus planes that we use. They are linked to that. Now, why am I saying this? I'm bringing this point because one of the things that COVID-19 is teaching us is the importance of taking advantage of proximate supply chains within the country and in your neighboring countries, even as you build yourself into the global value chains. So you are asked what measures are being taken. This is the framework. I want to argue that the AfCFTA provides us that framework to build resilient and strong regional supply and value chains. Two, since the supply chains that, as we know them now, have actually been broken, you are asking the question, what is it that we need to do today? I think most of the private sector actors that are represented in this panel will tell you that one of the major things that they are facing is the question of liquidity. And without liquidity, because of the lockdowns, you cannot be able to continue with your business. So as the Economic Commission for Africa, one of the things that we have been urging governments to do is, first of all, to provide liquidity to ensure that the private sector continues its operations, because it's only then that you can keep the domestic supply chains going, and those domestic supply chains being able to provide to the regional supply chains. And then two, we are also advocating that even as the international community works together with Africa in terms of not only saving lives, but also saving the private sector in the continent, to know that the African businesses are also connected to the global businesses. And so even as the G20 and the rich countries provide liquidity and stimuluses to their businesses, part of that should also be considered also for saving the transboundary businesses within the continent. And I think these are the policy issues that are currently on the table, which I believe are essential for the saving of the value chains that exist domestically and within the continent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Karinga. We know you had other engagements, but thank you very much for the insights and for sharing our next session, which we shall announce to you much later. But Asante Sana, and I believe today we'll have a fruitful discussion and we shall share with you the minutes. So I want to go to the next, I do want to go now to the next panelists. Mama Keita of UNECA, again, please prepare yourself for the question. What are the possible economic stimulus and physical measures that countries are taking to caution businesses and support the private in post-COVID-19 recovery? After that, of course, I'm going to invite Mr. Stephen Zibira from Rwanda, private sector. So as you prepare yourself, Mama Keita from UNECA.
And yes, as our lectures have shown all the role of the state, that the role that the state must play in the development process of the respective countries. And I think that all the countries in the continent are really raising to the challenge. They have adopted a lot of measures. Broadly, you have three sets of expenditures. You have expenditure for health. You have, because the crisis came with through the health sector, you have expenditure for households, and you have expenditure, of course, for businesses. And your question is really related to the one for businesses. In this area, what have they done? What are we observing? At this year, we have compiled a set of measures that we are seeing in countries. And those can be clustered into three groups, actually. You have fiscal measures, you have financial measures, and monetary measures. The overall objective that is sought by countries is really, like Stephen said, is to save jobs, to preserve economic fabric, to save private sector businesses, and also to save livelihoods. When you look at those measures, they have targeted all the spectrum of peace and also informal sector from one country to another. The type of measure that you see, you have subsidies provided to private sector's entity. You have flexibility in taxation and tax payment modalities. You have reduction in tax rates. You have payment of arrears to private sector. You know that the governments owe a lot to private sectors, and keeping that money for them is really preventing the private sector to operate. So they have done something on those areas. Some provide loans at zero rates or at low rates or really preferential rates. You have flexibility. We have introduced flexibility in loans repayments. You have initiative of debt restructuring. You have provision of guarantees and etc. Now, if I may, I will just highlight one or two examples from specific countries. I am focusing especially on the sub-region that I cover. I am director for the Eastern Africa sub-region, so this is why where I'm focusing my intervention. So, for instance, in Kenya, you can see in terms of taxation, you have a reduction of the base of corporate income tax. You have reduction of turnover rate taxation for some specific group of businesses. in Burundi and Seychelles, for instance, you have subsidies provided to some private sector entities to help them pay salaries and avoid layoffs. You have in DRC deferment of tax payment obligations, the most affected sectors, fast tracking the refunding of VAT. Okay. So in Tanzania and Uganda, what we observe is that they are expediting the repayment of arrears that government owes to private sector, like I said. An example of monetary and fiscal financial measures, like also Stephen said, at this year we advocated for providing liquidity to the private sector to keep them afloat. And countries have applied some of those measures by easing access to liquidity for private sector's entity. They do that through financial institutions, of course. So central banks have been working with financial institutions to make sure that there are liquidities, to make sure that they loosen some of the prudential measures that are usually imposed to financial institutions at all levels, both big commercial to serve all those kind of private sectors that exist, including the informal sectors, which make in some countries up to 90% of the labor force and 50% of GDP in some countries. So these are some of the measures that are being observed in the countries, and also of course, like I said, besides this direct support to the private entities, the governments have also been supporting the demand, because if there is no demand, there is no private sector, there is no supply. So those support to household, to population, to individual also is a sort of support to make sure that private sector continue to exist. In this sector, you have in-kind assistance to poor and to vulnerable people in terms of food provision, or direct transfers, whether conditional or non-conditional transfer. So let me stop here.
Thank you very, very much, Mama Keita, please for sharing with us on the economic stimulus and physical measures that countries must take. I also want to hear more from you on which economic sectors must be given priority in the recovery process and support in this arrangement. But before you answer, let me just welcome the Chamber President, Ms. Oliver Kigonga of the Uganda National Uganda Chamber. Uganda Chamber. She has just joined us, so we shall come to you. So welcome, Chamber President of Uganda Chamber. I want to go to the question that I posed to Stephen Ruzibira of Rwanda. Now, in Rwanda, we have seen to share, but at the same time, here in Kenya, we have been affected by COVID-19, and it's just good to report to you that as of yesterday, the tested number of people or the public is 85,058, and total confirmed cases of those tested are 2,216, and the deaths that have occurred are 71, but we can see a good number of those recovering well and leaving the hospitals. At the moment, they're at 553. So, Mr. Stephen Ruzibira, now, how are the employers and business dealing with the economic impact of measures taken? Stephen, I think, Stephen Ruzibira, are you with us? Okay, I'll go back to Mama Keita. Just add to the areas that you've pointed out in terms of economic sectors that must be given priority and recovery process in support of this arrangement. Mama Keita.
Again, thank you very much, Chair. I think that in terms of rebuilding, in terms of the thinking that we are doing right now, We need to draw lessons. We need to be strategic, ask ourselves the right question, and try to understand what is guiding the response right now. So what sector should be given priority? I think that there are several things that need to be taken into consideration. Like we said before, objectives are to save jobs, to preserve jobs, to save livelihood, to ensure that we still have enough food for ourselves on the continent. So I think those are some of the the principle that should guide which sector should be given priority, and also how the response is taking place right now. We have seen the importance that digital has taken place, the importance of departing from this vulnerability to import of pharmaceutical goods, from medicinal goods. And so how do we make ourselves stronger? I think those are the principles that should guide the response. Actually, we know that the sector that are most hit are indeed tourism, travel, logistic, construction. So, but in those sectors, what are those that are really able to bring back the jobs right now? Is it really tourism? Tourism depends still a lot on what the other countries are going to do. So if you say you provide all the support to those sectors now, if the global scene does not open up the way it is expected, so where are those investments going? So I think that some principles that should be considered are also the dependency, the extent of dependency on the rest of the world. So to me, we need to consider first the domestic market. What can be sold on the domestic market while selling those goods, also attending to the needs of the population, to the real needs in terms of health, in terms of agriculture products, the essential needs actually. So when you go after the domestic market, you break the dependency a little, and then you go to the African market, this AfCFTA, which is a great opportunity that we are speaking about right now. So those sectors that can attend to the demand that is coming from those markets, I think those are the sectors that need to be considered in the first place. Then you look at the wider market in the international market, global market. So jobs, extent of dependency, I mean, essential goods. I think those are some of the principles that we really need to look at when we are considering the issue of how we reopen actually. And then also you come with environmental consideration, climate change. So as we build back, we need also to be mindful of, I mean, our economies are very fragile, and let's, as we say, build back better, make sure that this time around we factor these elements, and we give priority to those industries that are less damageable for the environment, for the climate, since all these are really, I mean, having serious impact on livelihood and bringing countries very, very way back and reversing all the progress. So these are some of the principle that I would say that need to be considered if you take it. And then of course we need to also build the capacities of the private sector, of course, to respond to all the supply that is requested to attend to these needs. Yeah, this is it for now.
Mama Keita, thank you very much. That has also created a lot of attention, and the questions which are streaming in for yourself and the previous speakers, but we'll get to that session. Mr. Stephen Ruzibira, Rwanda, are you with us? Stephen, are you with us? All right, I will go now straight to, let us hear all the way from Uganda, Ms. Olive Kigongo, President, Uganda Chamber. We want to welcome you, and straight away I have a question for you, and this is for you to share with us what is the impact of COVID-19 on EAC businesses and the government responses in Uganda. So What are the mechanisms that Uganda has employed to support food security stabilization in this COVID-19? We know, we are aware that Uganda is very rich in agriculture. You have taken a lot of attention in terms of supporting this agriculture sector. What, again, are you doing or what have you done in other sectors? Olive?
Thank you very much. I'm actually not President Olive. I'm Brenda Chiwamwenda, Secretary General, Uganda National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. My president is not well, so you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very clearly.
My president is not well, so she asked me to stand in for her. And thank you so much. I'm Brenda, Secretary General, Chamber of Commerce. I'll be standing in for the president. She's not well today. And to your question, the impact of COVID-19 on businesses in Uganda, there has been a lot of negative impacts on many businesses. And I think this is something that has been discussed in a number of forums. Basically, there's been a lot of slow business activity. Different businesses have had to close shop. For the last 2 months, we have seen people out of action due to the guidelines given by our government in order to mitigate and control the spread of the COVID pandemic. And in so doing, we have seen businesses practically close shop. We have seen businesses slow down. The few that have actually tried to survive, we have actually noted that survival is next to actually non-existent. And you have mentioned our mechanisms as a government, as a country, for food security. Yes, it is true, and I think it is good to note that we still have a lot of food in our country, but naturally there's been a
network. We are losing you. We are losing you. Secretary General, we are losing you. We've lost you, actually. Okay, I will come back to her. All right, let me straight away now go to Tanzania, where I want to engage Paul Faraj Koi, President of Tanzania Chamber. I hope you're with us. My question to you is, what is the role of EAC Chambers of Commerce in ensuring businesses continuity and protecting jobs responses? The other day we had an issue between Tanzania, Kenya, between trade and our borders, and our heads of state actually discussed the few problems that are there, and I believe things are much better. You may want to share with us if you like. Otherwise, the question posed to you is on EAC Chambers of Commerce, how you ensure businesses continuity and protecting jobs and the responses. Paul? Paul, are you with us? Paul, are you with us? Uganda, have you come back? Uganda? Secretary General, are you back?
Yes, I am. Okay.
Please go ahead as we wait for the Chamber President Tanzania.
Kindly do forgive me. I think I got a technical interruption.
All right, please go ahead.
Yes, so what I was saying was that one of the mitigation measures that government put in place was not to lock down transport, because we do find that most of our agricultural goods have to come in from the upcountry, and different regions of our country produce different foodstuffs and come and produce different agricultural foods. So for the different foods to move, transport could not be closed. And it's been emphasized that the trucks cannot actually stop moving. And that is one of the sectors, the logistical sectors, that actually remained in operation. And I think that was also very helpful, though there was a sloth in movement because we had different transport channels in the country. But this one helped because we all know that most agricultural foods are very perishable. And in case of any delays of logistical aspects, we shall have plenty of spoilage. And with the in-time outbound transportation, that is very key for the different logistical channels to deliver foods to where they are needed. So that is one of the aspects that our government put in place. And then they have actually come up, because right now we've actually realized that there's plenty of food countrywide. So government has tried to put in place adequate storage facilities, like store grain, to store the perishables, cold rooms, cold warehouses, etc., so that they can mitigate the rate of spoilage. And with the different other aspects, it has encouraged a lot of, because with the closure of tourism, we can see that the value chains were greatly affected. And it is the many hotels, the many different tourism sites that actually do consume a lot of agricultural products, hotels, restaurants, all those different places. But what has actually been encouraged, I have heard Mama Keita mention it, the domestic markets. They're encouraging a lot of domestic consumption. And they're encouraging the different regions that produce different foodstuffs to actually concentrate. For example, we have the hilly areas of our country where coffee comes from. Then we have the central that produces the bananas and whatever it is. So they're encouraging a lot of exchange of these goods from one region to another, and they're encouraging regions to concentrate on the product or on the goods that they are good at producing, so that we do not create a very big influx. And in so doing, we have actually also realized, because even in this situation, we've realized we have had to think hard and come up with different measures, because we need a lot of value addition to the agriculture sector products. Because with this excess foodstuffs, high degree of spoilage, we need plenty of value addition in the agriculture sector. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Mr. Ngatia.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's anything I've left out.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We can only wish Oliver a quick recovery.
Thank you so much.
It's important your message through the Secretary General. We'll be back with the questions again from the floor. For now, I really want to go to Paul Faraj, President of Tanzania Chamber. Are you with us? Mr. Faraj, are you with us? We still can't be able to get him.
Mr. President, can I make a few comments on behalf of our colleague from Tanzania? I talked to him last week.
As you do that, as you do that, Charles, I want just to ask you a question.
Yes.
And I want you to answer the question on this. What measures EAC countries are taking to caution SMEs and protecting jobs as well? So in addition, you can answer that question.
Okay. I'll get that but I was going to say that I had a chat with the president of Tanzania Chamber last Manga and in Lungalunga, and one of the things I believe he would like to see, and that is in partnership with your chamber, is to see how the two countries, Kenya and Tanzania, have what you call very effective and functioning county chambers for you in Kenya and regional chambers for Tanzania. He gave me a few ideas and told me he wants to see how we can link up, let me say, like Kajiado County Chamber to the Arusha and Mara Chamber. The same thing with Kwale Chamber, with the Tanga, you know, to try to see that before we start getting too much government involvement in some of these lockdowns or trade disagreements across borders. And this is not something that is just happening because of COVID-19. We have had these issues for the last 10, 20 years. If we can engage directly that way, and in fact, that was his wish, that you start a conversation or we start a conversation between our boundary chambers of commerce, which I mean in Kenya is county chambers, in Tanzania they are regional chambers, Arusha regional chamber, Tanga region, and so on, Kilimanjaro for Taita Taveta. We start dealing with that because they want what we want to give to them. They want to trade with us. And for us in Kenya, there's too much agricultural production that comes from Tanzania to feed both Mombasa and Nairobi. So we cannot really just sit back and wait for government to help us here. The private sector, represented by chambers of commerce, can in fact start engaging. If the regional chambers, if the chambers at the borders are talking with each other, it means the regional commissioner from Tanzania, who is a government bureaucrat, and our county commissioner from this side will start also discussing. And that should be able to unlock something to do with COVID and the protocols of testing. That's a different story. But that is a conversation that we need to start. It had started over a while back and it got terminated. I think we need to revive that one. Now, regarding East Africa, as you know, our colleagues at the council, that is the East Africa Business Council, has been having quite a bit of conversation around that. But to me, East Africa is heavily dependent upon itself. You know, Kenya cannot do without Uganda, Uganda cannot do without Tanzania, and vice versa. We really need to use the framework of the community much more than we have otherwise been using it. I believe that even with the COVID, we have not fully utilized our own secretariat at the East African community in Arusha. We are not, for instance, I know we have problems in Uganda on a few things, chickens and eggs and many other issues. These are not things that need to go there because we really have a common market between ourselves, the 5 of us. We have an East African common market protocol signed by all of us. We need to adhere to that. Even without COVID-19, free movement of goods and services between the 5 East African countries should not be a hindrance. As long as somebody is crossing the border with a proper protection against going to spread the COVID on the other side. That means having had some, he is protected, he has been checked and said to be negative, you can cross the border. East Africa is only one common market. It may be having former boundaries in Maramba, Busia, Namanga, and so on, but it is one common market, and we need to look at it as such. There should not be a hindrance of goods and services moving from one country to the other. I get very disappointed myself, particularly when we engage. I go to Kampala, I saw a brother there, and I started getting told that Kenya is in fact protecting itself and it cannot allow Ugandan goods to come in. That should not be a conversation to be held at all. We need to consider opening the market. The boundaries are not there. They may be there, but they should not be there, because we are one common market. Free movement of goods and services, COVID-19 or without COVID-19, should be freely allowed as long as there is actually proper protection, that there is going to be no spread of COVID. On the other side, EAC has been trying to enforce that, but unfortunately, we seem not to want to listen to our own secretariat. I think that is a bit of an indictment to our own governments, because we don't seem to adhere to protocols that we have signed, that Ugandan goods should come here freely, whether it's chicken or eggs or milk going to Uganda. That should not be an issue. We need goods from Tanzania, and we got quite a bit of it, and that should be allowed to come in within that particular framework. So can we start having conversations with our own governments post-COVID, that we need to really think how we actually inaugurate the common market protocol. The EAC common market protocol must be actually adhered to the letter. I have to say this because if we cannot be able to reach out there, it is about 150 million people market. If we cannot be able to trade freely with each other within that particular market without any trade barriers, I don't know how we can achieve the African continental free trade area. That's a bigger market, and it will have even more challenges. So
thank you, Charles.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Charles. I will come back to you because there are more questions for you from the floor when we get to that session in a bit. But I want to go to Mama Keiza. Yes, Mama Keita. Mama Keita, I want to go back to you with this question. What are the post-COVID-19 economic recovery measures that need to be implemented to support the private sector to contribute to the African Continental Free Trade Area and trade integration agenda? Keita.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the question. I think again, I'm saying is that we need to draw lessons. We need to try to understand this COVID context, because this COVID context is really reinvigorating the assurance that the AfCFTA has a great potential. We know from our studies that it has great potential. When you look at figures in terms of consumption and in Africa, we know that it has great potential. When we look at import figure, we know that demand is there. African population need good. There are a lot of things that we import. But what's brought back to the fore this reassurance that we can trade among ourselves? I think that the fact that borders were closed, the fact that we were in front of certain emergencies, with the fact that livelihood had to be saved, and disruption in all these international supply chains, then we came to trust ourselves. Then the demand just appeared there. The demand for masks, demand for sanitizers, demand for personal equipment, all the stuff. So then we say we can produce it, and demand is there, and we are going to consume it. So we came to consume local products consumed locally. But my question is, what happens after COVID? And also, what's guaranteed this, what was the role of the state right now to guarantee, to trust the private sector to supply these things? I think the same principle need to guide us and to prevail after COVID. What I'm trying to say here is that the demand needs to be secured. Demand for locally produced goods. How do we secure that? Because the potential is there, consumers are there, but what does the state need to do for that? Okay, so that is one. Not only the state, and also what do we do to supply? I think that supply-wise, right now, what we are saying, that there has been a lot of repurposing of manufacturing. The private sector has responded well. It has received support from the state. So this is the kind of thing that we still need to see when we recover, when past COVID. I think those are the kind of measures that we need to think about. How also do we support innovation, manufacturing, AfCFTA competitiveness of, the private sector. Now, strategically, what kind of principle do we adopt to prepare to target this market? Is it only comparative advantages? Is it that we're trying to attend to fix some of the structural problems that are faced, our economies and societies are faced with? What we have observed with COVID is the huge vulnerability of African economies to some import goods that should not continue. I mean, food stuff, agricultural stuff, food stuff, and pharmaceutical and medicinal. We import a lot. I think Stephen provided a figure of 94% of pharmaceutical coming from outside Africa. So these are things that need to be fixed. We cannot stay with that vulnerability. So this is what I'm saying, that the kind of principle that we need to look at is, while doing, marketing, also being, we are also fixing some of essential issues, actually. Now, other things are how do we bring the private sector to produce? Access to liquidity, access to credit has proved to be a serious issue. When you look at surveys conducted within private sector entities, you see that liquidity is an issue to face their fixed costs, actually. So this has to be fixed. For that, I think that states who also have proved to have a very strong role in development of the countries need to really deepen the financial markets and financial products available to the private sector. I think, and also attending to several webinars. I attended one with a financial institution where they're saying that they're willing to provide credit to the private sector, but there is this risk. If they take too much risk while they are dealing with the savings of population, they are going into different type of crisis. So state also need to step in there and to fix this issue of guarantees to keep creativity of private sector going on and to keep capacity to produce. So access to finance is an issue. I think also bettering the business environment is important. Regulatory frameworks are really important. So clearly, the states really have to take central stage again and play a lot of roles. Now comes also the issue for the state to play its role of resource mobilization. We are seeing now that what they're trying to do is really to access to some liquidity from external markets. We have some countries have had access to loan from IMFs, also to some debt relief measures and all the stuff. But all that is also again putting into question the issue of access to new financial means in the future. When you and most of finance ministers are worried with this issue right now. If I take all these measures now to attend to COVID, what are my chances now to access to additional measures to rebuild back? So these are also issues that we need to consider. Macroeconomic frameworks that our countries are, states are faced with are really big issues that need to be looked at. In Eastern Africa, you have different level of debt burden right now. Some are more heavy debt than others, and then concerns are really different. But I think private sector and states need to talk to each other better to build both, to secure the demand, to make sure that the demand is there. When you look at also all these bulk of import that African countries import, why is it that it's our private sector importing all those things? Why is it that we are not producing some of them locally? We need to ask ourselves, is it the easiest way to import from Dubai and just flood from secure demand, but also to secure also supply, local transformation and supply? I think those are some of the issues that need to be looked at. You have also the issue of human capital and know-how, because the world is really, really competitive and people look for quality and at the cheapest price. So how do you ensure that? How do you promote technological development to make those entities, private sector entities, productive and competitive? So those are some of the issues that I wanted to flag here. Deepening regional value chains is something that we hear a lot. It has to take place. I think constant dialogue between the private entities and the public entities is key here to see where demand and supply meets. Another aspect also is to build also the demand and also to bring also the informal sector into, the formal economy. States can really build on the possibilities coming from the digital. In some advanced countries and even in some developed countries, we have seen the role of the digital to help countries to reach out to the poorest and, like I said, to support the purchasing powers of those most vulnerable population. So with legal IDs, you can know who is who and who is where and who is poor and who is rich and who need to be attended to. Same thing for the formal sector, because when you are formalized, you are localized, you are accounted for, you can be supported, and in this kind of severe crisis, you can be helped. So with digital, if we are able to bring those informal sector, it's strengthen the capacity of the state to collect more resources, also to support the economy.
Mama Keita, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Let me stop you there, because there's actually something that you've alluded to, and I really want that to be answered by George Dinda, who was representing the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Trade. Are you with us? George, have you come back?
Hello? Can you hear me?
George, can hear you. Thank you for coming. We had wanted you to give a few remarks as you represent the Principal Secretary, Jackson Weru. But at the same time, you have heard what has been alluded to by the previous speaker. What the question that I would have for you is what current policies has our government here in Kenya put in place to cushion or to promote trade and regional integration, as you also give your remarks. George.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. President. I think earlier I had some technical issue with my connection, but I've been getting here a bit of what has been happening. I've been on and off. Before even I get into your question, I just wanted to raise a few things that I think are important. That COVID-19 has come at a time when we've not even concluded the negotiations, which now throw the spanner into the works. You did mention in your opening statement that start of trading has been moved to January 2021, and we hope that moving forward we'll be able to conclude negotiations on phase 1 and phase 2 as well, so that Africa can start trading. Of course, the pending issues on rules of origin and tariff offers and trading services, I hope that we're able to conclude it. Now, I wanted to say that the government major role, Ministry of Trade, is to provide an enabling environment for trade to thrive, supporting private sector initiatives and opening up market access for our products. During this period, the government has really stepped in terms of providing rebate, and I think many other speakers have mentioned on incentives that have been given. For us as a government, I think we have provided such incentives to the SMEs in terms of tax. We have developed also protocols. One of the things that we realized that was going to be negatively impacted was logistics, because you have to keep people safe, you have to protect life, but at the same time, you must be able to get goods. And as a Ministry of Trade, we quickly moved in and developed protocol, because we we as a, our neighbors are landlocked. Some of their products get, pass through Kenya, and we don't want to stop that. So we quickly moved in to develop protocols that will ensure that the product move in, and that's why we are still having cargo moving across our borders. So albeit we have some problems here and there, but we hope that will be sorted. We are looking at things to do with trade facilitation, movement of goods. How quickly can we be able to facilitate that to happen at the borders? And that's what we are doing at the moment. And we hope with the development, with the development of protocols and further initiatives, we'll be able to keep our economy going. I want to stop at that for now.
Thank you very much, George. Just to emphasize, maybe before us, for clarity, you've mentioned over support that the government has given to SMEs here in Kenya. Now, how would you explain the government, or what plans do our government have in terms of the proposed economic stimulus program, and particularly to those who are targeting trade within SMEs?
I didn't get that.
George, you alluded and you were explaining that our government has given, they have supported the SMEs with a number of programs. And the question then is, how has the government been planning to roll out the proposed economic stimulus program, particularly to the SMEs and those targeting trade? Are you with us, George? George? Okay, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, George. I want to go to Olive Kigongo. You've been represented by the Secretary General. And the question to you is, the African Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity for development in Africa, no doubt about that, but it must be wielded by the private enterprise. So through doing so, businesses can benefit from and contribute to its sustainable growth and development. So how can chambers support to shape the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Again, sir?
Okay, I will repeat that question to you. African Continental Free Trade Area is an opportunity for development in Africa, but it must be wielded by private enterprise. So through doing so, businesses can benefit from the great opportunities that the continent has to offer and contribute to its sustainable growth and development. So the actual question is, how can chambers support to shape the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area? So as you think about it, Uganda, I'm not sure that, George, you've been able to come back to us. George, Dinda. All right, I want to close that session and go now to, because there are several questions from the floor, but I'll only pick a few because of the time limit. And as we wait for Olive to prepare her answer, I want to go straight to Charles Kahovo. But before I do that, Mama Keita, you have explained to us, you have shared with us statistics and how the SMEs can be supported, and also how we can mitigate the post-COVID. Now, how can the African Continental Free Trade Area provide business opportunities that will enhance industrialization in Africa in line with Agenda 2063 in the Africa we want?
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, let's take those two, priority sectors that we highlighted that are coming up. Pharmaceutical, health sector. In the health sector, when you look at statistics, you have for Africa 1.8, like less than 2 hospital beds per 10,000 citizens. Okay, and we have seen how deep or how hard a sanitary crisis can hit the economy and the societies. So this is a clear area to start industrializing. Why are we not producing those beds in Africa? What is so, difficult about that? Same for pharmaceutical. You can start manufacturing. We said that 94% come from abroad. It is dangerous. It makes population vulnerable, and it is needed. So that can have a long chain, because from the maybe agricultural product, or I don't know, whatever input come into that, but it will involve several processes to come to a final pharmaceutical product, up to packaging. Upstream, you have all those business support that are needed in terms of conceptualization and all the stuff. You have financial sector coming on board, quality control, laboratories, and all the stuff. So that long chain that will involve both production and services also, which are clear sources where things can start, I think. So there are avenues, and ECA is trying to provide, how do you say that in English? Proof of concept, using the pharmaceutical sector actually to show that it is really a sector where we can deepen regional value. Is all essential goods actually feeding Africans. So why not provide the bulk of it from the continent? When you take some sectors, some countries, sorry, import is almost the value of the GDP, or the value of wealth created per year. So some of that can be provided in the continent. Let's look at the composition of our imports, what is really intermediate good and what is final product. Let's start looking at those final products and see how they can be produced in the continent. So this is the simple and practical way of looking at it, I think. Demand is there, people need it because they are buying it from abroad. What are the capacities that are needed in the continent to bring the private sector to supply these goods?
Thank you.
I think as simple.
Thank you very much. So you being in the regional office for East Africa of ECA, I mean, you're interacting with women as a woman. You're interacting with a lot of women. We have seen women in business across the continent. So what's in African Continental Free Trade Area for Africa's women?
Thank you very much. Let me say what's the bit that I know about that. We know that, statistics show that women are the most involved in those cross-border trade, actually. So trade facilitation, capacity building on all sides in terms of trade facilitation, building capacity of customers, officers, also training those women to all the administrative processes that are required to trade, and also sharing information. Informing women will be very much important, because there is potential to move from your cross-border trade, to move from a country to, go way beyond. Markets are now linked. We say, free trade area, so it means to go from Cape Town to Cairo, and from west to east. So I think women need to be informed, and I think that we are bringing on board in all these conversations taking place in terms of the opportunity offered by the market. They are being informed and kept informed and trained. I think this is what I can say.
Thank you very much. So that is now clear. I can go back now to Secretary General representing Olive Kigongo, Uganda. There's a question addressed to you. Are you ready? Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngatia. And I think how members can contribute to the FTA is one, since we have we have members that we actually know and are more in touch with. So I think the chambers would be more in position to do proper selection of the appropriate members, because these free trade areas need able participants in forms of factories, industries, the different players, manufacturers, etc. So I think the chambers could go a long way in helping to select, because they know their members better, appropriate members to actually take up space in these areas. Then also, I think they also need, in so doing, they would be able to do proper due diligence of their members that are going to actually engage in production in these free trade areas, because these the free trade areas have actually been put in place that you find that sometimes we are not sure, or governments are not sure who should go there, who should actually participate. So I think chambers can do a great job in doing this. Then we also need to identify, chambers could actually identify the necessary and appropriate sectors to take up space and carry out adequate activities as needed, as demand of maybe the East Africa, maybe our local markets, our countries as they stand, because I believe we interact with our members and we know better who best suits what and what products actually needed. So we are better placed to actually come up with this kind of information. Then we also need to encourage, chambers could also do more encouragement of factories, manufacturers to come up with the necessary. We have come up, the COVID-19 has come up with a new language of basic commodities, basic persons, basic human resource, essential, and etc. So we would actually now get into this proper research to identify the essentials, the basic, and etc. We've actually discovered that now there are sectors like the health and safety products that are needed. So can we identify which factories can come up with these? Mama Keita talked about, and I think this has been worldwide, coming up of sanitizers, things we had never actually thought about, masks, etc. We've been given standards of what is required. So I think we could encourage our SMEs, our different partners, our different members, because we will know who exactly can do what. And then we could actually encourage them to get into these free trade areas.
Thank you.
And we could also...
Olive, I want to interrupt. A question coming for you, since you're there. There's a question coming from Andrew Mamburi. It states, as border county regional chamber chapters, what mechanism can we put in place to ensure sustainable engagement or cooperation post-COVID-19?
Post-COVID-19 mechanisms too?
Yeah, what mechanism can we put in place to ensure sustainable engagement?
Okay.
Post-COVID-19.
Thank you so much. And maybe if I could first finish what I was talking about, just about 2 more issues. And maybe we also need to negotiate for, chambers could also negotiate on behalf of their members for appropriate incentives from their governments, because I'm sure different governments give it different incentives for, we've seen different manufacturers coming to our countries and they're given different incentives from governments. So we could actually help, since we identify these people that can actually come up with the products that we do need, we could negotiate on behalf of these members to our governments to give them the necessary and due incentives so that they can encourage them, like tax holidays and etc. and whatever it is, so that they can be able to actually do the manufacturing of the needed products. And then we also need to encourage the EAC markets, since we are working as governments, and I think Mr. Kahutu said we can't stand alone. We have to stand as one. So let's keep our borders open. Let's keep our markets open, because when we do manufacture all these products, they are going to need, consumption. We need populations to consume these goods. So let's keep our markets open. Because if I'm going to manufacture Uganda and I'm going to concentrate on Ugandan products, and then the Kenyan counterpart cannot take up Ugandan products, then I think we are going to be closing markets and we are going to be closing consumption. So let's open it up. Now back to Mr. Andrew Mwamburi's question. What mechanisms can we put in place for sustainable, if I believe that is what it is. One, we need to really engage each other. We need to talk. We need to do a lot of talking. Because if I use an example of the transport sector, the logistical sector. There's a lot that has come in with the trucks taking so long at the borders due to the COVID issue. And I think the truck drivers have become a source of concern regarding the transfer of this disease. So for how long are we going to sing this song of truck drivers, the truck drivers from Kenya and whatever it is we are putting in place? These are health issues. We need to save lives. But livelihoods must go on. And the delivery of goods, we shall not close borders for delivery of goods. So I believe governments need to come up with long-lasting mechanisms and strategies in place. For example, like the health issue. We've been testing, I think in Uganda, drivers have been tested on the Ugandan side. And if found ill, they're actually treated in Uganda, which is a good thing. But I believe we must have centers within our countries. For example, I don't know, in Uganda, we had, I think, UKTOA, and we have the Drivers, I think, Association. So I believe at the borders, from the origins of countries of origin, there should be testing mechanisms where this can be made faster to mitigate the times spent at borders and then the turnaround times of the drivers are taking to actually get to designated designations to deliver these goods. And then also, I think governments are going to have to not to work in isolation, because there are things, whether we want it or not, we must come up with solid mechanisms and strategies that we are going to use as one block. But if you say Uganda should come up with its own health strategies, Kenya, Tanzania, etc., then I think it's going to take to go a long way. So in trying to work out this problem. So we need to come up with some strategies as one block, as East Africa, so that we can ease the operations at the borders.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Because of time, I'm not going to go to all questions, only 2 questions so that we can wrap up. But I want to give a chance to George Dinda, if you're with us. George, all right. I want to go to Charles Kahodho, CEO of East African Chamber of Commerce. And it is good that we all note that as an African continent, we are attracting FDIs. And just to give you an example, for example, Ethiopia last year attracted $3.6 billion US. Ghana attracted $3.3 billion US. Nigeria has attracted $3.3 billion US. Kenya attracted 670,000 billion US dollars, and Uganda slightly over. What is it then we can do as a continent to attract more FDIs? Now, back to you, Charles Kahodho, as the chairman of CEO East African Chamber. What is your take on other key Africa agreements such as EAC, COMESA, and SADC? And while you are explaining, you can also expound on how Kenya is working on agreement with US free trade agreement. So does it have a positive or negative impact on African continental free trade area? Charles? Ms. Charles with us?
Yes, I'm coming. Yes, I am coming back. Thank you, Mr. President. Obviously, some of the arrangements that we are having in place for expanding the market within regions, like what you have just talked about, EAC, COMESA, SADC, free tripartite, free trade area, it has a direct impact on AfCFTA, but not in a negative sense. As you know, AfCFTA was actually premised on, in fact, being anchored on what you call regional integration blocks. That is the East Africa Community, Economic Community, SADC, COMESA, ECOWAS, and even UMA, that is Union of Maghreb, the countries in the north up there, the Arab countries. That is what was premised that the success of the continental free trade area or Africa continental free trade area would be anchored around those regional blocks. Now, East Africa at that time, in fact, was actually the model or the best integrated in terms of market regions in the continent. Of course, now, if I look back, I think ECOWAS is much better than we are in East Africa. But if we now combine an integrated East Africa, an integrated ZADC, and COMESA binding the two, because COMESA cuts across, is a common market itself, binds the two, that is a bigger market. And that market in itself, if there is free trade, and I'm talking about the real free trade, movement of goods and services across borders within a particular the COMESA's region, COMESA ZADC region, then to achieve the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is not really difficult, because we will have actually already integrated hub of the continent through the three regional economic blocks, COMESA, ZADC, and EAC. Now, if ECOWAS is that way, and I can tell you, because I know ECOWAS is a bit more integrated than any other region in Africa now. If we combine the total sum of all these, and then of course we bring on board the region of which you are chair, the Great Lakes region, which will actually bring about Central Africa, which has not fully participated in many of these issues. But now, because of the Great Lakes region private sector forum, it can have a voice within actually the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Then continental integration becomes possible and it becomes feasible. We can see that it will happen. But for it to be fully a reality, we need other enablers. And the enablers that I have in mind are what you call the corridors that we need to build. We have a number of transport corridors within the economic and infrastructure corridors that we have within a continent, but an infrastructure development like what we have in Lamu, the LAPSET, what you call Lamu Port, South Sudan, Ethiopia transport corridor, which is supposed to connect Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, that will also become a very major enabler to actually realizing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because goods and services must move, and free movement of them means that there must be physical infrastructure, either rail or road or air. All these are a bit of challenges, but as we say, when you have challenges, you also have opportunities. So investments, and mainly particularly private sector investments, must come in to support. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah.
Understood and very well articulated. Thank you, Charles. One last question we are breaking. This is from Pradeep Shah. It says, what are the long-term impact in business after this COVID-19 pandemic? Are we going to go back to the actual business in terms of projects, exchange trade, understand the border issue, and also how we can move easily across without a lot of stopovers and delivery of goods? This question is posed to Dr. Mama Keita of UNECA. Mama.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the to the person who is asking the question. This question is a question that I was asking myself as well, and I raised it when I first took the floor, actually. I think, yes, the question is what happens after COVID? Because indeed, COVID has triggered some behaviors that are really appreciable, that are giving us assurance that the AfCFTA is really full of potential and can be implemented. Now, what do we do? Do we take the momentum and take it further? This is what everybody needs to commit. And again, the state is at center stage. Regional body also have a great role to play, but the private sector also have to respond. You don't just get the support and you leave it there. You have to respond. Private sector is the one to produce, the one to supply. So all these transactional issues that prevent trades to take place need to be attended to, need to be fixed. Trade facilitation measures have to be adopted. Again, we don't leave it, I mean, as economists, we talk about free market, but the COVID crisis is coming to show us that there is no such concept right now. The role of the state is really prominent, and it has to play that role. And the state has shown us that it is really resourceful and it can be flexible. Let's that prevail and let's that continue after COVID. The state has done a lot of flexibility, a lot of support facility to private sector. It means it is possible. Let's not it be only possible during crisis, but still come with all sorts of support that is possible to trust the private sector, to remove all the constraints to trade and make it happen. This is what I can say. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think now that brings us to a close. I'll give 2 seconds each just for your parting shot. Mama Keita, your parting shot, 2 seconds.
Sorry, Chair. I'm a Francophone. What does it mean, parting shot?
Can you say it?
Huh?
What's your closing?
Okay, thank you. My closing remark. So again, the potential of AfCFTA is undeniable. Potential is there. Only commitments from all parts, not only the state, not only the private sector, together with the international community, with regional bodies, with continental entities, it can happen. And let's make it happen. We're focusing on fixing the structural vulnerabilities, actually. Less dependencies, more self-reliance, and more capacity building. And yes, it's possible that AfCFTA will create more jobs, improve livelihoods, improve the structure of our economy and make them more resilient, and then more prosperity for African countries.
Thank you very much. Chamber President Uganda. Secretary General for Chamber President Uganda.
Yes, sir. You can hear me, sir? My closing remark is simple. Everything is possible. We can go a long way if we act and think as one. So let's ride on the wings of opportunity that this crisis provides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ESC CEO Charles Kahodo.
For me, I would say that, as we say, 1,000-mile journey starts with one single step. And I would like to challenge my chambers in East Africa, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, that they must start trading more with each other so that, first of all, we can realize the East Africa community regional integration. If we can do that, only then can we start dreaming more of actually achieving the continental integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area. We must actually unlock the trade barriers that we have between Kenya and Tanzania, Kenya and Uganda, Uganda and Rwanda, and so forth. If we can do that, of course, the sky is the limit for the continent because we are endowed with massive resources, natural resources, and to exploit those through value addition would definitely make us trade more with each other and, in fact, get more wealth, generate more wealth for employment creation. We cannot allow the multinational companies out in Europe or North America to come here, exploit our natural resources, go and add value to them, thus creating jobs in their own countries, and then bring us finished goods for us to buy now, exhausting the meager foreign exchange resources that we have. We must think collectively as a continent that Africa belongs to us. We can own it. In fact, we have been a document by the World Bank said that this decade, 21st century, belongs to Africa, and we must make that as a reality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very, very much. We, as the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, are working very closely with the entire private sector, with the public sector, and also the development partners. In fact, we are saying that we are there to support under our 3 pillars, which is advocacy, networking, and trade facilitation, to support our SMEs and also to advocate for them so that the government can formulate better policies that will be able to come and see that all their businesses and all their anything that they're trading on, they are within a very good business and environment. As the chairman of the Great Lakes Region Private Sector Forum, of course, again, we are opening up our borders so that we can be able to trade and eradicate any conflicts within our borders. In fact, we were scheduled to have a conference. The ICGLR had already organized to support this conference. However, it could not happen because of this pandemic, but we shall give you the new dates so that you can also join us. And as we embrace the new technology on e-commerce, I believe you are going to accommodate us. We accommodate each other. We hold on to all our gains. And as again, the chamber president, I take these organizers. This has been a great achievement. We have seen the fruition of this since morning, and therefore I take the opportunity to thank the panelists and the audience for your time and commitment to share your knowledge and experience. And on behalf of all the organizers and partners, I call upon for an all-inclusive and collective post-COVID-19 recovery efforts by deepening economic cooperation amongst countries under the trade cooperation framework to strengthen economic regionalism and withstand similar shocks in the future. And therefore, and as partners, there is an urgent need to develop and provide a broader roadmap and action plan to support the post-COVID-19 recovery of the economy measures through high-quality job creation and reforms to strengthen resilience and competitiveness in line with AU's Agenda 2063 on again for the few development partners and financial institutions who have come to our support as the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I thank you, including and in particular Equity Bank, who has provided over $2 billion to the SMEs through the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also a numerous support from the development partners to make sure that we support these people and these businesses to go through this pandemic in the next couple of years. Thank you, and may God bless you. In the next session, we shall invite Charles Kahodho to be the moderator, and we shall give you the dates. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.